Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and as you can see, I have with me a superstar from Bangladesh and a rising star from Bangladesh. I have with me Professor Shahab Inam Khan, who is professor at the Jahangirnagar University in Bangladesh, a prestigious university. He's an expert in international relations and foreign policy. He comments frequently on India-Bangladesh relations. He got his PhD and he studied with a mutual friend, Sanjay Bharadwaj, who is also a very big name on India-Bangladesh relations at the JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. So Shahab has actually spent some time as a graduate student in Delhi, so knows both Delhi and Dhaka. So he can speak about perceptions and policy discussions at both ends in Delhi as well as Dhaka. And interestingly, Shahab has also worked in Maldives, if I'm not mistaken, with the UN Development Project. So he is quite familiar with the neighborhood of India, as we like to call it, South Asia. So Shahab, thank you very much for joining Khanversations. We are delighted to have. We also have with us Salma Tareen. She is a professor who teaches international relations in Bangladesh, but currently she is a PhD student at the University of Delaware. And at the moment, her research interests are India-Bangladesh relations. So she's going to be sitting in as a co-host today. This is, I think, the first time I have a co-host. And she's not here to fact check Shahab. She's here to fact check me. So she's here to help me in this conversation that we are going to have. So Shahab, it is interesting that in Modi 3.0, we see that perhaps the most important current head of state in the world seems to be Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh. She was invited to the inauguration as she was in 2019. She was very well received in Delhi. And I will be sharing your article, your recent article in one of the Bangladesh newspapers about her second visit, her state visit to India, where she was received with honors by the President of India as well as the Prime Minister. So I have essentially some opening questions with regards to like what are the key issues. I understand that India, in order to press forward its neighborhood first policy, at least the Indian administration feels that they have been very successful in Sri Lanka, but they feel that they are facing competition from China in Bangladesh. And so you can see India is trying its best to improve its relations, bringing Sheikh Hasina to G20, bringing her again for the inauguration, and then also she becomes the first head of government to visit India. So just share with us what are the broad areas besides India's desire to show that it has very strong relations with its neighbors. What are the issues that are actually impacting India-Bangladesh relations at the moment?
Thank you, sir. I think this is my second conversation with you. In
fact, the previous one was with dinner. If you notice, you were right here.
I would be missing that dinner part. And then, of course, I was teaching as your colleague at the department at UD. And we had a very interesting conversation that time that how Bangladesh is actually progressing over the past many years. I think the Prime Minister's visit was applauded. I mean, it was heavily appreciated and heavily welcomed by Delhi and beyond. First of all, she is now the most senior politician or the state leader, the government head of the government in South Asia. She has been there for quite some times now. This is the fourth term. And she has been holding the forte very strongly. And I think she has been catalyst in foreign policy, and she has always been a keen supporter of multilateralism and the best of relationship with the neighborhood. It is not only India. Even when Sri Lanka was dwindling, Prime Minister went ahead and offered currency swap of $200 million for an economy for like us was remarkably high. And she went on and supported Sri Lanka. She even went to the Maldives and generously discussed the defense cooperation, economic cooperation, and so on. I think the same spirit she sees India as not only a vital ally for the political party she holds, Bangladesh Awami League, but also for Bangladesh's overall economy, which largely benefits from India. Uh, Even if you look at India's trade portfolio, Bangladesh is the largest trading partner in South Asia, and that also tells you that the economy is heavily interrelated with the Indian economy too. So, which means if we see any tremor in Indian economy, that automatically has an effect on Bangladesh economy. On the other hand, Prime Minister has always argued that if India's northeast develops, I mean, that essentially would reduce insecurity syndromes that we get to see, which has the potential of spillover effect on us. So essentially, that spirit, she always argued that connectivity between the mainland India and northeast India will allow the optimal utility of our infrastructure, which has heavily been supported by the Chinese, Japanese, and the multilateral agencies. And then subsequently, this will eventually become win-win situation, despite massive discourse about many awkward issues, which I don't really find very reasonable most of the time. And I think this main concern has always been the sustainability of Bangladesh economy, which is remarkably impressive if you look at our GDP growth, which has literally outpaced many of our neighbors, including India, Pakistan, of course, Myanmar, to great extent, Indonesia, on an average of 6.4. I mean, I'm quoting Boston Consulting Group. Even if you look at the IMF data as of December last year, I mean, we stay ahead in terms of per capita GDP in comparison to India for 4 years, and for Pakistan it's been 8 years. And I think our current GDP stands, I'm quite sure Tareen would know, that is 2,621, slightly above India and significantly above Pakistan.
I
So,
want
which means,
to ask you a quick question about that. So, in your article, also you wrote that Bangladesh is hoping to graduate into out of LDCs
right,
by 2020.
2026.
And
So, which,
I went and looked at the list of, there are only 8 Asian countries which are listed as least developed countries. But the cutoff is $1,300 per capita, and Bangladesh is double that in terms of GDP per capita, and on par with India. So what I don't understand is why is it still listed as a least
oh,
developed country?
it's I mean, the GDP per capita is one indicator. So there are other indicators such as trade, complementarities, and so on.
Even
So
in
I think,
Human Development Index,
right,
Bangladesh is 129 and India is 134. But India
right.
is listed as a developing country and Bangladesh as a least developed country. I found that quite
No,
confusing.
I think the main reason is the preparedness, and there were many other subsidies that has to be lifted gradually,
Oh, okay.
because we still have huge subsidies going on in agriculture, energy, and so on. So these are to adjust. I think there are several criteria, among which GDP is one of the criteria. And by 2026, we expect to meet all the criteria as well. But we would have actually met the criteria by 2021, but the COVID was essentially that has pushed us. And we also actually requested delaying the graduation by several years, so that we can recover from the COVID perils and then move forward. So I think this is how we are seeing that the Prime Minister or country's number one agenda is to ensure that this graduation process is smooth and we have the best economic relationship with the neighborhood, in which India is certainly the key factor. The second important issue when she was there, and I think this is on the part of both Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, understanding that the usual course of economy is not going to be enough. So, which means you saw that the digital partnership came up, so is the green partnership came up. Because even if you look at Asian Development Bank, it is becoming the climate bank. World Bank is eventually becoming the climate bank. I mean, so you cannot really disassociate the future disasters, natural disasters, or sea level rise, or climate induced threats, which means that the economy has to really change. I think we are now talking about resilient infrastructure. Then we are talking about new food production capacities, new seeds, new technologies for agriculture, and so on. And I think India is very much poised to provide support in that. And I think Indian digital infrastructure is also being featured, I mean, in this talk. So this is the second important issue. While the third important issue has always been water. While we haven't, as I mentioned, that not surprisingly, because the Tista is one of the 54 rivers. And if we even solve the Tista, then we still have many other rivers. So I think.
Tareen had a question about Tista. Tareen, what is it?
Yeah, sure, Professor. So I wanted to ask, since you mentioned already, Tista has been like a long-standing issue of contention between the two countries, and a lot of public sentiment is also related to that Tista, Farakka, all these river issues. So recently, the biggest thing that was expected from Bangladesh was to have a deal on the fair share of Tista water. But what we have, like the discussion was on management of the water, and India said they are going to send a technical team very soon to Bangladesh. So on the other hand, China has already offered or showed their intention to help us in that regard as well. So and this morning I was just going through the article where Mamata Banerjee already told that she just mentioned we cannot share water with Bangladesh. So how do you think what are the gains for Bangladesh in this regard? Is there anything substantial we actually gained from it, or we have to just go toward China?
I think I would always take the China part out when it comes, because Delhi loves to think about China. I mean, our media loves to think about China. I mean, you have to always remember that Chinese will only invest when it is financially viable, right? Or strategically, it is super duper important. Now, what happened here is this is a very, very expensive project. It's $1 billion project. I don't think Bangladesh is going to be very, very interested about spending $1 billion at a stretch, which has to be in the form of loan or grants or soft loan or commercial loan, whichever way, which will come with the interest tax and everything, right? So I think it is very difficult to really say that the Chinese are really coming to invest. I think that's more of a myth. Then what happened is Bangladesh literally approached. The very simple reason was that we need to find some sort of technical solution for that. Hence, the talk went on, and that became a very branded issue that the Chinese want to invest. I would give it a little slow pace. What instead has happened that when Delhi has offered some sort of technical cooperation in this regard, the same issue will come up. I mean, the financing, the money that is needed, the technical capacities needed, how long is it going to take to implement these things? And Bangladesh is pretty much open to many other countries too. And in my article at the very, very end, I mentioned that while these are two new government and same old prime ministers, but the ground realities are completely different. Bangladesh prime minister will remain as the cardinal feature of foreign policy. But now that there is a coalition government, I don't think that it would be very easy for Delhi to immediately embark on any kind of solution to water. Even if you look at yesterday, Mamata Banerjee was quite vocal about Ganges, and then you will also be seeing Nitish Kumar being a part of the NDA government, may or may not have some voice regarding his part of share of water in Bihar.
It is quite interesting that whether it is in India or whether it is in Bangladesh, the Bengalis are governed by strong women. But if they became friendly, you would have far better. I mean, Mamata Banerjee has been blocking this for a long time, isn't it? She seems to be, and given the fact that the recent elections in which BJP tried very hard to overturn her control of the state, I want to go back to this China thing. Clearly, you are underplaying the role of China, but China has what, $7 billion of investments already. Bangladesh is a formal member of the Belt and Road Initiative. So, could you tell us a little bit more? That a lot of commentators here in the US were commenting that the reason why Sheikh Hasina went again to meet with Prime Minister Modi was essentially as a signal, because she is now going to Beijing. And sometime in July, she has a visit scheduled to go to China. So I'm trying to understand this, the trilateral aspect of this dynamics, especially on the security side of it, given that for the last few months, there's a lot of complaints from Bangladeshis about Chinese weapons. Even the jet fighters that they have are not doing well, and companies are delivering substandard products. And when the Bangladeshis are asking for repairs, etc., they're asking for more money. So I want you to throw some light on this trilateral.
Let me clarify, because the visit to Beijing was well decided, and decided well ahead of time. I think it was probably decided in February. And then the India visit was always in top of agenda. The first reason is, I think generally Bangladesh Prime Minister or head of the states would visit the immediate neighboring country, and that has been the practice for many years. And I think this is a very I would say that this is a misperceived idea that she went to Delhi just prior to Beijing. Rather, it was essentially the date was not being fixed because the election was there, and who is going to be the prime minister and how. So these were the themes that was in the horizon, and that also allowed a new opportunity to meet the new opposition too. The Gandhi family, which is intrinsically related to Bangladesh's history, and most certainly the prime minister's family history too. And I think that was another great opportunity to really revise the relationship with the Congress. And then, if you look at her visit in this time, was also not about too much coming up with concrete LOCs and line of credit and so on. And I think that clearly shows that the visit was much more of a political interest and economic interest than this strategic interest in the part of Dhaka. Coming to this another issue, as you have mentioned, but the Chinese BRI projects, I mean, by now it is $4.45 billion has been disbursed under BRI, and the fruition you can see. I mean, even if you look at all these infrastructure projects, apart from BRI, if you look at the Padma Bridge, which is a flagship bridge, which has largely been constructed by the Chinese engineers and contractors, or even if you go to Dhaka, in many cases, elevated expressways and so on. And I think all of these are giving dividend to everyone. I mean, even if when you're connecting West Bengal with Agartala, I mean, this is the same road they will be using. So I think that is one.
Oh, you mean the India's connectivity project with Bangladesh involves
has largely
highways
been
built by China.
facilitated by the Chinese. If you look at the road infrastructure, now the Indian LOC has been phenomenal. I mean, 7.862 billion $1 billion worth of LOC has been allocated in favor of Bangladesh over the past 14 years. But if you look at the data until the end of 2021, unfortunately, I don't have the 2022-23 data. So far, $865 million has been disbursed, which is almost less than 10% of what over the past 14, 15 years. Now, that's largely due to, I think, our own capacity to absorb that money. And on the other hand, the delay in disbursement of or implementation of the projects funded by Indian government. And essentially all these projects will have Indian contractor, Indian laws and clauses. My point was that had that been materialized by now, I mean, substantial chunk of infrastructure would have been built by Indian assistance by now, which is unfortunately not the right way to see Bangladesh's infrastructure. If you look at Bangladesh's development, even investors, it's not the Chinese are the largest investor, it is the Americans. And if you look at the bilateral donors, it's the Japanese. And if you look at Bangladesh's trade partner, then the Chinese come in and the infrastructure investment. So I think that the China part is there. And I think during Prime Minister's visit, obviously, further infrastructure will come up. I mean, pending infrastructure and the ongoing infrastructure. But what is the main issue that may feature in this visit is the financial stability. I mean, stabilization of Bangladesh's economy. It's bubbling at the moment. Foreign exchange reserve is depleting, and the challenge is to maintain that foreign exchange reserve to go on. So one issue will be to do the trade in RMB, which is the Chinese currency, because we have the large portfolio, and then obviously to inject financial capital into the system so that the foreign depletion can become much more stabilized. So I think that would be the main issue. I personally, my hunch is that would be the main issue that will. When it comes to defense, and I think very interestingly, our defense contribution of the Chinese defense industry has significantly become lower. I think our at the moment it is somewhere between 70 to 72%, because we cannot just unplug everything. The very simple reason is the supply chain and everything here. But if you look at our portfolio, I mean, diversification, the Turkish are coming in, the Brits are investing over here, and I think in the coming years we will also be expanding towards the Western Hemisphere. That certainly is related to our whole diversification, is obviously related to overall security, but significantly dominated by Myanmar right now. Now, if you look at the Myanmar defense ecosystem, which has been aided by both India and China, and I think we have to be very pragmatic and practical when it comes to defense diversification.
Is the Prime Minister Modi, essentially a shield for Sheikh Hasina from the aggressive posture that the US took with regards to elections and democratic backsliding? I mean, is India protecting Bangladesh from the US, or are US and India playing good cop, bad cop with Bangladesh?
I think when this conversation you and I had over a Ramadan iftar, I was exactly that thick of the moment I was in Delaware. I think the Americans always had a very interesting relationship with India, but certainly I can understand with my stint in Washington D.C. is the U.S. policy was completely different than the Indian policy. Mm-hmm. But certainly, the India raised its concern with Washington D.C. I would argue that, of course, the U.S.-India relationship had a chemistry, but certainly, I understand they both pursued separate policies, which eventually came to same fruition. If you look at the post-election, the US-Bangladesh relationship has gone back to the normalcy, and the business is, as usual, has started. So I think the ground reality over here, that the absence of a meaningful opposition will always get Awami League to come back to power, whether we like it or not, anybody loves it or not. And the democracy has been always the forefeature of the US foreign policy towards, even if we sometimes criticize, is that a double standard? I mean, sometimes we get to see that. But despite that odd, I think Prime Minister had a very strong position regarding the Western understanding of Bangladesh's election and her understanding of Bangladesh's democracy. And I think these two odds really coexisted, and eventually now we have the best of relationship with each other. And here the very interesting thing is the Chinese. I mean, we should not forget that part. I mean, they always say that the election is the internal issue of Bangladesh, and therefore we are not going to step into that issue. And I think that also gave a sense of comfort for everyone, that the Russians, whether we love it or not, were also a part of that discourse. They really didn't interfere into this whole thing, and then eventually the much hype that sanctions and so on will come was never really an agenda for Washington when I was in Washington. I mean, it is more about Bangladeshi media or Indian media or local media hyper flashing that sanction is coming and post-election US will give us a sanction. I don't think I have ever heard that in Washington. Even I shared with you that I don't really hear these things. I don't think Washington policy response is not on the basis of media hypes.
India is prioritizing a lot about this connectivity issue, especially during this meeting, during this summit. There are a lot of discussion regarding bus service, train service, and also there is a probability of rail transit being allowed to India. So, as you know, there have been a lot of issues going on, and again, the public sentiment that Bangladesh is selling itself to India. I mean, there have been a lot of things like that going on. So, do you think if we offer India more and more access through this transshipment or transit and more interconnected network, do you think it's going to also help Bangladesh or make India more dependent on Bangladesh, and Bangladesh can play these as a bargaining tool in future maybe? I mean, what
Okay.
are the positive things we have from this?
Okay, from 1971, we both are dependent on each other. Let's make it very clear. I mean, we might not be accepting in our public rhetoric, but if you look at this, I mean, look at Bangladesh-India trade, right? Bulk of the trade from India comes as our raw material.
Yeah.
Same is with the Chinese. Bulk of the raw material comes from China. And that's how we do trade. I mean, that goes back to India, that goes back to the Western market, and so on. If you are eating onion, it comes from India, right? To a great extent. So these are essential commodities that that makes the market natural to each other. This is one. And second, in terms of connectivity, I mean, I at the very beginning told you that if we give some connectivity to Northeast India to be connected with mainland India, the pressure reduces, infrastructure gets optimal use, and then the money circulation continues. Now, the second part of the story is whether Bangladesh has actually got its transit with Nepal and Bhutan, and then Bangladesh essentially would like to connect itself with China and all the way to Central Asia for the similar reason, for the trade connectivity and trade facilitation, right? So this is where the debate lies, that whether Bangladesh has actually received its due, which will not only improve Bangladesh's economy, but will also help Nepal and Bhutan to grow together, right? So, which means I mentioned that while India has understandably focused on sub-regionalism, if you look at Bangladesh's prime minister or Bangladesh's foreign policy, it is much more multilateral. And I'm very happy that in this meeting, rather than all saying BIMSTEC, we need to further bolster BIMSTEC, SARC actually was featured, which was dormant, which was dead. I mean, look at the press statement. I mean, which again tells you that if you bring SARC, you eventually would like to see Pakistan and Afghanistan coming into the whole trade ecosystem. And if you look at South Asian economy, intra-regional trade is less than 5%, my God. I mean, which is the least in any part compared to any part. Southeast Asia is about 25%. African Union is escalating like anything. European Union, forget it. I mean, that's way above our grade. So which means our understanding is that it has to be greater market. I mean, Nepalese market, Bhutanese market is very small. I mean, we need that, they need us, but certainly if we have the raw material access to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Central Asia, and in future energy coming from Central Asia or China or Myanmar or down Thailand is something that will be offering in next 10, 15 years of time for Bangladesh. If you look, and even if you look I mean, fascinating data. If you look at China-India trade recently, $135 billion trade between India and China with $100 billion trade deficit. So it's the public rhetoric is absolutely phenomenal that we are going to shoot all the dragon and everything. But essentially, economy doesn't play like that. The more confined the economy is, more you will be losing. The cost of non-cooperation is so astronomically high that South Asians are now understanding, given the trade imbalance with every other country. So I think the connectivity is very important, but we can always talk about how far and what kind of connectivity we can offer, because we also have to understand our capacity in terms of roads, our capacity in terms of economy. These are very important. So I think I don't find any problem if we have any connectivity, because many times we forget that sovereignty matters too.
Tareen had another question. I think it was smuggling or something.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I'm just touching all these issues with a lot of public sentiment, you know. So, smuggling again, narcotics, gold, or cattle smuggling have been biggest issues. And although both countries know that there have been a lot of networks engaged in both countries who does these activities, the smuggling activities, but we see a lot of border killing. Even recently in May, there have been, I mean, two Bangladeshi smugglers were shot dead. So
how do you know that they're smugglers?
Yeah, I mean, the traffickers.
Well, how do you know that they're traffickers?
So I mean, mostly I think the cattle smugglers, they are most of the time shot in the border.
Okay,
So
I understand your question. I mean, first of all, I think Bangladesh-India border has seen so much of killing of Bangladeshis, which is unparalleled in South Asian history and to a great extent any civilized history over the past decades. I mean, even you don't see that many people being bumped off in India-Pakistan border. I think there is a lot to do here, and I think we have been talking about this for God knows how many years now. I think one of the way that can be done, because in many cases, if I take the trafficking, if I take the smuggling, if I take even, I mean, if you look at that young girl, felony was not a trafficker, right? And so the whole thing is pretty much like this. Is when you have a poverty in the border areas, somebody has to sell those cows to the smugglers. I mean, they're selling it because they need to sell it. Somebody is buying it because there is a demand. So supply and demand is very much there. Whether it is cow, whether it is dress, whether it is betel leaf or something, right? So what happens is the border areas are incredibly poor, wherever it is, whether it is India Nepal border, Bangladesh India border, Bangladesh Myanmar border, in many cases. So one of the solution that has literally worked a lot is border huts. When you put up a border hut, Indians are coming and selling, Bangladeshis are going and selling, at least some sort of economy is continue to grow. I mean, there has been a very successful examples of that. I'm not too sure if any killing has taken place in those areas that I don't have data about, but you can well investigate and see if that border hurt has really reduced. The second issue is we have a regular exchange of expertise, goodwill visits between two sides of the border forces. The good part about Bangladesh side, and I've been telling this, probably we go to India, China, America for training. I think this is the first time when Bangladesh is in an absolutely great position. As you would very much know, that we are the leading contributor to UN peacekeeping operations across the world, which makes us international force. I mean, apart from the US, probably we have the largest footprint of military abroad in terms of United Nations peacekeeping operation. So our boots are pretty much highly engaged in the global atmosphere, which goes unnoticed, right? So we often only see that, but look at the military presence of Bangladesh in Africa. I mean, astronomically high. So what it means that we have a very strong international law experience. We maintain, even if you look at the world's largest refugee camp is in Bangladesh, coming from Myanmar. I mean, 1.1 million people, out of that 670,000 people lives in a very small, concentrated refugee camp. And you get to see that we practice international law. I mean, the military, the police, they do. And I think the expertise can be exchanged with BSF. They can come and get fantastic training from here. They can get familiarized with the local culture. They can understand how the border functions, not only one side, but the other side. And that's how I think the new creative, innovative way we have to look into.
It is, I mean, that was a very interesting question, Tareen. Thank you. Given the fact that you've also worked in Maldives, this question is obviously inevitable to you, that Maldives and Bangladesh both have, to some extent, an India out constituency. So in Maldives, it had an impact on the election itself, that India out was the slogan of the current president. Whereas in Bangladesh, it was a much more smaller sentiment. But my question to you is, if you notice when the Prime Minister was campaigning, he referred to Muslims as Guspitias, as infiltrators, a term which is sometimes used for Bangladeshis, and this whole perception that Bangladeshi refugees are not only all over Bengal and Assam, but they are also in Delhi and Noida. I heard an Indian YouTuber talk about how the next mayor of Delhi is going to be a Bangladeshi illegal.
I wish that was the case. I would love to see that. But
so I just wanted to know, was there any resonance in Bangladesh after Prime Minister Modi made that comment during the election campaign?
I think
a little bit more about the India Out campaign in Bangladesh.
I mean, in that case, first, somebody has to understand Bangladesh very well. I mean, it's an extremely resilient country. I mean, high pitch, high decibel media in Delhi really doesn't reflect Bangladesh's values or understanding at all. I mean, I have written an article, wildly inappropriate views. Even if you take any data, I mean, if you take any data, and probably that goes unreported. I mean, I was listening to on YouTube, and I was like, literally, is this the perception, by saying somebody was saying that Bangladesh's father of nation is somebody called Nurul Kader, and I said, like, hell bends, this guy is a movers and shakers in Indian trade industry or something. I mean, look at the purpose of telling you that is, I think there is a lack of understanding about Dhaka. And if you look at the economic reasons, I mean, even if I go to Northeast India, for an example, I mean, apparently Bangladeshis have taken over. Now, CA was there, NRC was there, and I think the Bengali myth has been quite busted in a very, very, very different way through legal process and the court and NRC registration. And I think uh, general perception should take that into consideration. And then if you go to Mr. Amit Shah coming up and saying something, Mr. Subramaniam Swamy is saying something. But again, I think Bangladeshis really, really don't bother about this to a great extent. The very simple reason is, I think, much more educated way of seeing things. I do agree with you that there is always a pocket. And if we compare it with Maldives, I think this will be unfair. Because, first of all, Maldivian population is distinctly different than Bangladeshi population. Bangladeshi population is not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. So you see Hindus, substantial number of Hindus, 8 to 9%. Even if you look, I mean, even if I'm a Bangladeshi, if I see from a very Muslim point of view, how many cabinet members are Muslims, or given the senior portfolios? If you look in Bangladesh, how many Hindus are there in the portfolio? You would find amazing numbers, and I think that also gives you an understanding that the society is. I may not agree to the term secular, but I certainly do agree to the term plural. And I think that's very much there. Otherwise, you wouldn't have seen a number of non-Muslims representing in the parliament. If you look at the bureaucracy, I mean, phenomenal number of non-Muslims are there, whether they're secretary level positions, senior secretary level positions are there. In military, you get to see. But I think those are the things largely goes unnoticed, or perhaps I sometimes got selective amnesia that we tend to forget in terms of our convenience. So I think these numbers are very much there. I mean, somebody has to just Google and come and see the Bangladesh parliament, Bangladesh civil service, Bangladesh doctors, and how many of them are. So I think that diversity is not there in Maldives. So that makes the whole thing different. The second issue is Bangladesh's economy is very deep. It's one of the top 50 economies, if not 40 economies. I forgot, it is 32nd or 47th. I forgot the number. So, which also tells you that we have a significant diaspora abroad. So, which means our diaspora ecosystems are not only Middle East. I mean, contrary to everybody thinks that God knows if every Bangladeshi is in Middle East. No, I mean, if you look at UK, United States, Japan, Australia, Canada. Even I make this funny remark sometimes.
There
global
is
financially.
one city in the United States called Hamtramck, where every elected official is a Muslim. They're mostly Bangladeshis. And the only city where the azan is on the loudspeaker, that is Hamtramck.
Right.
Plus, Brooklyn is also very Bangladeshi.
And then if you go to New York, you get to see Bangladesh Street and everything. But the point is, I mean, I often become sarcastic by saying that, look, Global Financial Integrity Report has showed that the money siphoning from Bangladesh has been astronomically high. I mean, 15 billion dollar, perhaps $1 billion a year. If that is the case, if I take that, even that money goes to United States, Canada, UK, Dubai, Australia, where not. Even some of the high-profile corruption case, all of them fled away to, many of them are in the Western Hemisphere. So I think when our money goes to Western Hemisphere, then the problem is less. But when the Western Hemisphere comes to Bangladesh, the auditing of Bangladesh bank becomes, or Bangladeshi economy becomes really, really an interesting topic. But when you ask that, where has that money gone, and would you like to send that money back? I think we get a different conversation that time. So that's why I say that not only the population is all over the world, money is all over the world too. So in a sense, what my point over here is, I do agree that there is a pocket of anti-India sentiment, and that is largely due to the political. I mean, even if you look equating Bangladeshis with whatsoever, is perhaps people are responding to that in a very polite way, not by just going in a jingoistic way and then we larkelenge India or something. That never happens in this country, because people are very busy with their economic activities. People are extremely fast growing, and I don't think they really have enough time and patience. Of course, you get to see some funny comments in YouTube and social media and so on. I think we can largely live with that comfortably. I mean, even if you post this, you might hear or see funny comments. And
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
the
we get
only
a
thing
lot
you
of.
can do is, well,
India has a
perspective is a perspective.
India has a large battery of professional haters. They will be all over this channel with
But
all kind of.
thankfully, Professor Khan, thankfully, I think when Tareen is here, any of my students who will be with you soon, probably you will get a very different perspective about Bangladesh.
Inshallah, definitely. So, Shahab, thank you very much for joining us, and Tareen also for joining this conversation. It has been really very interesting and informative and thought provoking. And thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, Tareen, to you
Thank you,
too.
sir.